Matthew Horace. He's going to be at Left Bank Books tomorrow night for a book signing and a book reading. No, I'm sorry. He's going to be at the St. Louis Public Library, the Schlafly branch in Euclid in the Central West End, courtesy of Left Bank Books. I'm sorry, Matthew Wallace. The book is, first, Matthew, are you there?
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. The book you have written is called The Black and the Blue. And you are a former police officer, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a former police officer and federal agent of 28 years.
28 years. Federal, state, you worked in all over the country for 28 years. You've teamed up with former St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter Ron Harris to write the book, The Black and the Blue. And your premise for writing the book is what?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was being called on, it seemed like week after week, day after day, month after month, to talk about these police shootings. And we took a deep dive and analysis, not only of the different incidents, but also the culture of policing. So my premise in the book is that to change sort of the dialogue, we have to change the narrative. And to do that, we have to recognize that policing comes with a culture that we have to really look at in terms of changing criminal justice in the United States.
And what's the culture of police work?
Well, there's so many different nuances to the culture of police work. Number one, we don't like to be called to the carpet. Number two, we have this culture of when we are accused to stand our ground and stick together and sort of double down. And number three, that there are implicit biases and unconscious biases that impact the delivery of police services in the United States.
Well, I think everyone can agree that in every entity, whether it's not just police, but it's school, it's fire, it's talk radio, it's everything, right? There are inherent biases in everything we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the problem becomes is that we are one of the few professions that want to deny that these biases come into play in the delivery of services. In other areas, people admit it, just like you did. In every other area of society, it's okay for implicit biases to creep in and for us to check ourselves and deal with them. But in policing, we still have people saying it's not an issue, it's not a problem, and it is an issue. And through my voice and others in the book, we make that very clear.
How well are you schooled in the St. Louis policing world? Because it seems like St. Louis is very different than other places.
Right. Well, it would seem so. And, we talk a little bit about, in the book, we talk to a great extent actually about Ferguson and what created the tensions that sparked the outcry and the rioting. But we don't go into the Michael Brown incident as much. We make it a topside leadership issue that there were things brewing for quite some time. And you're aware of the ticketing and the fining and all those sorts of things. So I am familiar to that extent, yes.
So here's the thing that during the whole Ferguson riots, I was on Fox News trying to explain this to them. They refused to believe me. When I went on and tell friends, and we talk about Ferguson now 4 or 5 years later, and I say that the police chief of Pine Lawn, Anthony Gray, who had 2,000 people in the town of Pine Lawn, wrote 17,000 tickets the year before, and then went on television as the attorney for Michael Brown's family decrying police brutality and the excessive tickets. You want your head to explode.
Right. It's absolutely right. There's so much information that people broadly just don't know. I read an article yesterday about New York City Police Department, and one of the police unions is saying, we're being told to write all these tickets, and the administration is saying, no, you're not. And the police are saying, yeah, but we get penalized when we don't. So again, the public draws an opinion based on what they see, but there's so much that they don't know. And through the voices of others in the black and the blue, we talk about exactly what you just mentioned.
Yeah. We had stories of black police officers, right? So the argument is police departments should look like the communities that they service. And yet we've heard from black police officers who say, hey, you know what? We're called every name in the book because we're siding with, quote unquote, whitey. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. What do you want here?
Well, you know what? I've said this repeatedly, and I'm going to continue to say it. When you're African American and you wear a badge, sometimes you can't be black enough, and sometimes you can't be blue enough. So you're trying to walk that line and navigate the politics internally in your departments, but also convince the public that you serve that you're there in their best interest as well. And it can be very challenging.
Yeah. It seems like, and I'm glad you wrote the book. You're going to be in town tomorrow. The book is called The Black and the Blue. The Cop Reveals the Crimes, Racism, and Injustice in American Law Enforcement. You're going to be at the Schlafly Blanche of the St. Louis Public Library tomorrow. I want to talk about driving while black and being pulled over, because it's clearly it happens. We all have to acknowledge it. I mean, is it as simple as, how do we move along from pulling over a black man driving a nice car in a nice neighborhood? How do we get past this? If there's something we can learn from this, how do we learn from this and move on?
Well, I think the public at large has to understand that when you hear people like me and others saying that it happened, to believe us, listen, talk to your African-American and minority friends and say, hey, has this happened to you? Because we still have this issue in the United States where people really don't believe even things they see. And a good example of that is Walter Scott in South Carolina. Our research showed us throughout this process that most people still believe that they hadn't seen that video, they would not have believed that a police officer would act in that manner. Well, what's it going to take for people to believe that we still deal with this? Now, through my voice in the book, and I say, hey, as a federal agent, I've been stopped and profiled, and police officers have given me, reasons that they were stopping me that were inaccurate, right? But then when you show them your credentials, then they say, oh, why didn't you show me your credentials earlier, right? So there's this thing like, it's okay, and you're okay because you have a badge, but I'm sorry for stopping you. We got to get to a place where we use probable cause and reasonable suspicion the way it was designed by the Constitution, not made up along the way.
Yeah. Matthew Horace, do you have any suggestions in the book?
Well, yeah, we talk about recruiting, we talk about training, we talk about police leadership, bringing people in and holding people accountable. We talk about the idea that you can't work for 3 different police departments and a 4th department hire you despite what's happened at the other 3 departments. We talk about community engagement and communities getting engaged with police departments. But at the end of the day, it's all about accountability. And there are some great examples in the United States, like Chief Harrison in New Orleans and what he's done with that police department.
Yeah. St. Louis has 88 municipalities in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and we've got something like 60 some odd police departments. You would agree that that's absurd, right?
Well, it is, and I've seen it in other states. In other states, what they're doing is they're merging law enforcement services, so you don't have those individual departments of 5 and 6 and 20 and 16. You merge them and make one department with one set of standards. And where that has been done, although it's problematic on the front end, it produces results on the back end.
We recently had our North County Cooperative Police Chief suspended. The public doesn't know why. And then quit 2 days later to go work for the Attorney General in the county. And, people are like, oh, the racist cops. And you're like, well, hold on a second. Don't you think we deserve a right to know as a society why he was suspended as the police chief of the North County, Cooperative? My point is this, Horace.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut you
one
off.
would think that you should. Something that's serious enough to fire a police chief has to be pretty substantial. So the idea that he or she could get another job in law enforcement is troubling in and of itself.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and here's the thing that was so frustrating about Ferguson, because everything that caused Ferguson hasn't changed. They're still writing massive tickets. They're still writing, you miss, your grass is too long, your barbecue's too close to the street, or, any myriad of the issues. Nothing's really changed. They might have spruced it up a little bit. They might have changed some of the wording, but, nothing's changed. All of that, and 5 years later, nothing changed, and we have protesters demanding that the Ferguson market sell to the Michael Brown family, and yet they're still policed by the same standards, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, we say in the book that, we've had progress, but we haven't had change. So what's it going to take, and how many more people have to die, and, how many more communities have to burn and things like that before we really get significant change? And people have to be committed to it. And you can't just talk about it because, as you say, Ferguson now is years in the mirror for us, and we're still dealing with the same issues. So really one or two incidents away from the same thing happening again.
Yeah. Matthew Horace, you're in town tomorrow, St. Louis Public Library, the Schlafly branch on Euclid. The book is called The Black and the Blue. A cop reveals the crimes, racism, and injustice in America's law enforcement. 28 years, federal, state, and local level. Matthew Horace, safe travels, and thanks for stopping by.
Have a great day. Take care.
It's 9:21 here, Big 550.